everybody tonight? Good? Hey, look, I'd like to welcome you to the second annual Cow Pasture Psychology Awards. Okay, so much for that. I was just seeing if you were paying attention. Hey, tonight, Humphreys County Tea Party welcomes each and every one of you, and we're proud to have you in our community, proud to have you participating, enlightening, and engaged. As always, we always start open with an opening prayer, and tonight we're blessed to have Mr. Floyd Wanamaker.
Pray together. Father, we thank you for the privilege of prayer. Prayer is a rope that gets God's attention at his throne. And we always should pray and not faint, not to give up. We pray for our nation. We pray for our leaders. First of all, we are instructed in your word to pray for those in authority over our nation. We pray for our president. We ask you, Lord, to turn him around for where direction he's going. We don't have to be a non-stand to know that our country going in the wrong direction. We ask you for intervention. Raise up people. We thank you for our Tea Party as an arm that's helped raise up to get our country back in the right direction. I know it's been criticized in the news media, but I know deep down in our heart the Tea Party is raised up by God to help get our nation back in the right direction. Bless this meeting. Give wisdom. Help them to seek you for wisdom. Said you would give and not break not. We pray you give wisdom to our leaders. They seek you for wisdom and knowledge how to use it to the best advantage. Help our country get back on track. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I'll do the pledge. I'll do the pledge.
Okay, this time Mr. Pangle's going to lead us in the pledge.
Rise, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this time we're going to have Miss Anne Marie Hollis. She's going to sing a patriotic song for us.
If tomorrow all the things were gone you'd worked for all your life, and you had to start again with just your children and your wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away. An American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from New York to LA. Oh, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, and I'm proud to be an American.
Are we blessed or what? Most of you guys that are regular attendees know that I don't normally start the meeting out. I normally leave that to Jerry because I'm not much of a public speaker. But I want to thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes of your precious time this evening. There are a great many things to cover, so I promise I'll be brief and to the point. There comes a time in one's life that such great things occur that it causes the very soul to awake and take notice. Things so profound that it causes a complete shift in paradigm. Some of you might be wondering, what is a paradigm? Well, it's one of those $10 words that you pick up when you deal with folks who think they're much smarter than you are. Usually the liberal elite. A paradigm is a widely accepted example, belief, or concept. These are the things that make us who we are. Now, I'm neither a liberal nor particularly smarter than my fellow man, but the word paradigm fits this discussion. So let me provide a couple of examples. When I was 18 years old and serving in the Navy aboard the USS Suribachi, I became friends with a man named Michael Sloan. Now, Mike was a corpsman, perhaps a corpsman to some folks. A Navy corpsman is responsible for the general health of other Navy personnel. If you injured yourself, he'd stitch you up. If you're sick, he'd give you medication and make you well. Now, to most people, Mike was great at his job. Anyone with an ailment knew that Petty Officer Sloan would take care of them and comfort them. To me, however, Mike was exceptional. Why? Well, Mike introduced me to Jesus Christ, the Son of the Almighty God, the healer of broken souls. It was because of Mike that I made a paradigm shift. I once thought I was in control of my life, that I ran it. But spending time with Mike, I came to realize that God is the one who's in control of my life. Now, my paradigms have shifted many times in my life. When I had children, when God led me to my wife, Melissa, and again, when I was moved to get into politics. Now, this last part requires a little bit of an explanation. I used to be agnostic when it come to politics. I didn't really care one way or another. Until one day after church, I decided to watch C-SPAN covering the Obamacare debates right before the final vote. What I witnessed both dumbfounded and infuriated me. See, I've been involved in the healthcare industry for more than a dozen years. When I heard arguments, that people couldn't get healthcare and were dying in the streets, I knew it wasn't true. Not at least in the light that they were portraying it. Hospitals are required by law to treat people whether they have insurance or not, whether they have money or not. They cannot turn people away. The next thing you know, they voted into a law which I felt was based on misinformation and lies. I was mad as hell. I told my wife that night I was going to do something. I didn't care if it was wrong, but I was going to get off the couch and figure this stuff out. 3 days later, the Shopper's Guide come out, and I saw an article from a guy named Jerry that was inviting anyone who was interested in starting a Tea Party meeting to give him a call. Well, you guys know the history from there. Today, we're told that we're nearly $16 trillion in debt, but that's not the truth. The truth is more like $136 trillion in debt. You see, we have $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities with Social Security, Medicare, and the Medicare prescription drug program. An unfunded liability is money that we owe, but we simply don't have it. We have, through this process, enslaved our posterity for generations to come. Our problems go on and on, but I'm preaching to the choir here because you are informed and you are engaged. That's why you're here. You're patriots. I believe that it's time that we, as a group, make a paradigm shift. We need to move toward teaching and getting others engaged. We have to actively participate in fixing the problem that we have. It'll take more than a vote or the right candidate to heal our country. We must, just like our forefathers, pledge our sacred honor to maintain what they fought, bled, and died for. With that, I'll lay the following 4 items on the table for your consideration. If you can give money or time to a candidate that you believe in, then do it. If you can go to door promoting a candidate that you believe in, then please do it. If you can dial a phone and help with the phone bank, then please do it. And if we straw poll a candidate and he or she gets at least 67% of the vote, then we should actively endorse that candidate as a Tea Party. We should try to get them elected. Thank you for your time and patience, and may God bless each one of you. I'm going to turn this over to Jerry.
Comes out easy when it comes from the heart, doesn't it? What Joe meant by that was we've always played the middle ground on this stuff. When we endorsed, when we did straw polls and they won them, we let them use this stuff in their advertisements, and that's all we've done. We've seriously talked about taking a more active role in helping candidates if they win a supermajority, which is 67%. If they don't win 67%, then it's business as usual. And by no means is anybody forced to support anybody they wouldn't normally support. We will probably just be coordinating the committees to help these individuals if that was to happen. And it doesn't usually happen. 67%, a supermajority, that's a lot, depending on how many candidates you got. But it's trying times. And I don't know that we have enough time to sit and just lay the... Also, I will say one thing. Usually when you get the candidates in front of the people like we have been doing for the last couple of years, and they talk the talk, you people know how to vote. You people do the right thing. And I know we haven't held anybody back from helping candidates, but we would like to openly encourage you at this point to help a candidate, no matter who this is, no matter what party, what affiliation. If you believe this is the guy, then I think we're obligated at that point to try to help these people as much as we can. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all you all that helped Zach. That endeavor was a fight worth having. It didn't work out well for us, but we had to fight. And I feel good about it. But I really need to thank you all. You all, the little bit of money he got came from people like you. And we have a lot of people in this room that did help him. While we're talking about a lot of people in this room, I got to do a couple shout-outs here. We got, you might raise your hand. We got Benton County here tonight. We got Dixon County here tonight. We got Perry County here tonight. We got Houston County here tonight. And we got Murray County here tonight. We got Hickman County here, and we got Henry County here. Get them hands up. A lot of the good things that I accomplished through the Zach deal was to getting to know some of these people much, much better. And to know that this fight is going on this level, and more than this county. I'll tell you that right now. It's going on all over. And we will be a force to be reckoned with. And that's just the way it is. All right, we're going to run a booth at the fair this year. The fair is the 12th through the 15th. We'd like to get two volunteers for each night if we can. And on Saturday night, we're going to run the concession stand for the fair. And they've opted to give us a free night for the meeting rent. That's $120. We took them up on it. If I got to do the hot dogs myself. If I do the stuff, they're really not knowing probably what they're eating, so I don't know how that'll work out, but it's whatever. But Pat will be signing up some people if you want to help out. If you want to help us help you, we're up for it. We finance these things with donations, don't forget us, and we're blessed. We don't have any money, but we're not in the hole. Every time we need money, it comes. It's a blessing, I'm telling you. And I don't know if anybody would have a problem with what we just talked about as far as the changes that we're looking to make. You need to contact me or Joe, and we'll talk about it. And if we get enough contacts on that issue, we'll reconsider this, because this is you all, it's not us. And these decisions are made by a core group, as a rule. And if you would like to enter the core group, you need to let us know, because we always got some work to do. We'll put you right to work. And that's the deal. But this is about you and how you can be more effective in this fight. And we believe that's the way we'll do it. All right, we got a busy schedule tonight. We have 4 candidates we're going to hear from. We'll be hearing from these guys on 15 minutes. They'll give us up to 15 minutes on who they are, what they stand for. And then we'll take about 5 minutes of questions. The questions will come from, you'll come forward and Mr. Johnson will moderate the question, or he'll hold the microphone for you so we can hear you. And make them questions. Don't make statements. And your candidates will answer these things for you, and afterwards we will have a straw poll. At the bottom of the straw poll is going to be a list of legislative priorities that I'd like for you to circle 2 of them that you would like us to pursue. And when we lay out our legislation for this year to fight, we'll take the majority of those into consideration. And it's stuff like in education, illegal immigration, 10th Amendment. You guys know what's wrong. You know what's wrong or you wouldn't be here. So, and we have officially joined the 7th Congressional District Coalition. It's very similar to what the 8th was. I like the way the bylaws are laid out much, much better, I think, as far as to suit me the way I personally do business. And that legislation will be pushed through that group there, or they will help. Numbers of groups help when you're trying to move legislation. When you go talk to them in your Humphrey County, that's one thing. When you go talk to them in your 17 counties, that's something else. And we've made good strides just doing it one county at a time, but I think working with the 8th, the 7th on their own, and the 2 together covers a very big part of this state. And I think that would make us much more effective in getting our job done, and that's what we're here for. So at this point, we'll get started with our speakers for the evening. Our first one, this is the first one. We're going to do the Congressional 7th District. This will be held by Marcia Blackburn right now. Our first speaker will be Mr. Ryan Aiken. He'll give us 15 minutes of who he is and what he's about. And he tells me he's not a speaker, but we're going to find out.
And Marcia Blackburn isn't here because she's at the Republican National.
Yeah, Marcia Blackburn's at the Republican convention. She has a speaking role, and Bob Corker hadn't made up his mind yet which convention he's going to.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that. Everybody, I'm Ryan Aiken. I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives. Glad to be a candidate on the ballot this year. We've got a lot of trials and tribulations that the Congress has been through in the past. And I think we definitely need some good changes going on, more American values. We've gotten away from that. Excuse me. That's what it seems that the Congress or the elected officials, they've lost where the site should go. As I say, I'm not a speaker, so bear with me. What is our national language here, ladies and gentlemen? It's English. Why do we have to press a number? Why do we have to choose certain documents? They have to have certain teachers in school to teach the students in either Islamic or Spanish, either one. Those are costs that we shouldn't have to bear. We need to take our country back. We need to put it back to where it is, where it was going to begin with, where they've lost sight. The people back in the 30s and 40s when they immigrated here, they conformed to our country. They learned our language. Some of them changed their name. They became hard workers, realizing the American dream, and it's still here. It just has to be brought back out. And that's what we need to make sure that it's instilled within the children nowadays, that we need to come in and put it right back into them. We can't do that without proper representation up there in any elected office. There's a few things that with the illegal immigration, that's a big standpoint. If you take care of the illegals in this country, I feel you can take care of three major concerns. The welfare system can have some reform because you won't have them taken away from the system. The problem with that is when it was written into law, it was written as a person, any person, which instead it needs to be written any citizen of this country. If you're not a citizen, why are you taking from our country? That is resources that are there for us. That Social Security system there for every one of y'all that y'all have put into is being alleviated by people who've never put a dime into it. We need to reform that system. The tax system, we definitely need some reform there as well. We're overtaxed right now. They're not allocated properly. They have way too many programs going on, just sucking the system dry. How many millions of dollars are we paying out needlessly? I'm losing my thoughts, so excuse me. Where we got to go is backstep a few steps. I think this is something that if we do this, we can get back on the right path. Right now, we got politicians out there that want to rule us. They're supposed to protect us. We're supposed to be protected by them. They're turning this country socialist slowly. How much more can we allow? I can't stand for it anymore. I've got children. I've got grandchildren. Where are they going to be when they grow up? What do they have to look forward to? I'm seeing a grim future for them, and I feel sorry for them. And when I was growing up, it was a bright future. It's gone down. Right now, the country is giving away so many resources. Let's take, and I don't mean to pick on any nationality, the Indians or the Muslims come over here. The country's giving them $750,000 loan, interest-free, for a 7-year period. As long as they don't show, as long as they do not show a profit within their business. As I understand it, directly from their mouth, they don't show a profit by raising their own salary. After the 7-year period, they hand it off to their brother or their cousin. Does this country, our own country, does it do anything like that for us? Interest-free loans, tax-free status? Why are we doing it for those who want to become a part of our country? If you would like to become a part of our country, it needs to be written, conform in full. We speak English, ladies and gentlemen. We pay taxes. We pay interest upon our loans. This is the land of opportunity. If you would like to get here and do something with it, we offer the chance, but you have to make it yourself. Every one of us has done that. I'm flabbergasted to see how far it's gone, really, and the trend that is continuing on. I know I've got a few more subjects to hit on. We definitely need to reform the Social Security system. We got to make sure it's here for us. We put into it. It's y'all's. It's all of our money. Taxes, well, we got to get some reform in there as well. We're paying enough as it is. I commend Tennessee for not having an income tax in this state. We're doing a fine job here. We should be proving to the rest of this country how it can be done. I'm going to keep it short and brief right now just because, unfortunately, the way I feel, and I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen, but I appreciate your time, and I'll be glad to take a few questions right now.
Anybody has a question, come forward. Mr. Johnson. Come on, get you on the microphone, Scott.
Can't stretch.
How do you stand on Agenda 21?
Agenda 21?
UN-mandated property rights issue. Basically, it's a UN treaty they want to shove down the throats.
No, this country is built on its own values. We do not need outside sources coming in and trying to tell us how we need to do our things in this country. As a matter of fact, there's one thing I did forget to hit on. Well, how can we continue to fund other countries? We got our own backyard to clean up. How can we tell them how to run themselves when we can't even take care of ourselves? We must do and prove to everybody that we are self-sufficient. And if we can't be that, how can we tell somebody else how to do their thing? UN has no business in this country as far as making rules and trying to govern us. As I say, protect us, don't rule us.
What would be your direction for homosexual marriage?
I'm not at all for that. The Bible states the union of marriage is between a man and a woman and nothing else.
I'm wondering if you would mind making a statement, express your opinion regarding our current sitting governor's appointments of Islamics and Islamic committees involved with the Homeland Security and the Department of Children's Services.
Right there within itself, you've already mentioned the problem. Islamic, they have different values. Let's take, for instance, they built a mosque here under so much protest, and I protest their mosque. What if we were to go to their country and try to build any denomination of a Christian church? We would be shot, executed. I'm sorry, this is a freedom of religion, but that is a religion that is out to hurt the American people from an internal infiltration that is being let go, and they're allowing it to continue. And he needs to alleviate them from any forms of the governmental system.
A while ago, you touched on Social Security.
Yes.
You know, it's full of bonds, which are IOUs. It's broke. Mm-hmm. I talked about it a little bit at the start.
Yes.
And you say that it needs reform. In what way or how do you think that it needs to be reformed so that it does work for the next generations?
We need to ensure that people who have not put into the system are not benefiting from the Social Security system. If this was an individual retirement plan set up by the government for you, why is it being dished out to those who have never put into it? I can understand giving it to a spouse, family member, and for a time of need. But however, I do not agree with giving it to people who have come into this country just to drain our system and not be a productive member of it whatsoever. If you did not put in, you are not allowed to get out. Right now, I mean, it needs a lot of, I have to go into the whole system as a whole in order to see exactly where to start and where to end. But it needs to start right there, is to stop giving it away to those who don't deserve.
I'd just like to add one thing to what you were saying there.
Yes.
There's a lot of folks that are worried about this privatizing Social Security. However, if we don't privatize it, right now, the people up in Washington are stealing it. So
correct.
Wouldn't it be a little bit better to just have our own? We may have a little bit less or something, but at least they won't be stealing it.
We should have the opportunity to actually back out and not contribute to the Social Security system. We should have that choice. And if we choose not to be a part of the Social Security system again, we should be able to get no less than 95% of what we've put into it, pull it back out. And I say that because of what's been stolen from the system.
All right, brother, we're out of time on this one. We'd like to give them stand a big thanks.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
This time we'll hear from Mr. Jack Arnold, running on the same seat.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Pat and Jerry Pangle for inviting me here tonight to interview with y'all. I'd also like to thank you guys for taking an interest in the future of our country, for going that one extra step, that one extra mile to do something in addition to going to the polling place. Now, I said interview, and that's not an accident. That's what this is. This is a job interview, right? You can tell it's a job interview because I'm wearing my best suit and I got my lucky lapel pin, right? But you also know it's a job interview because if y'all were to vote for me in November and I was to get elected in November, you would be among my more than 700,000 bosses. Think about that, right? I would be your employee. You would not be my employee. And I think too many people in Washington have forgotten that fact. They have forgotten that they are our employees, the employees of the taxpayers, of the people who live in their district. My name is Jack Arnold. Like Mr. Aiken, I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives for Tennessee's 7th District. Like Mr. Aiken, I'm not running as a Democrat or as a Republican. I'm running as an independent, and that's deliberate. That's for a reason. I'm running on reforming Washington, and I'm running on supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States of America, and I consider those to be nonpartisan issues. I consider that to be a nonpartisan platform. I'm also running as an independent so that you know that I'm not up here because of Wall Street money. I'm not up here because of PAC money. I'm not up here because I got money from a bunch of rich friends. I'm doing this because, like you, I'm a concerned citizen. Now, if I seem a little bit too happy to be somebody giving his first political speech tonight, that's because I just had my first kid. Her name's Alice. She's back there with my wife, Cindy. So if I also seem a little bit tired, maybe a little bit scattered, maybe I look at my notes a little bit more than I should, all of you who has children will know Alice was born on the 17th. You have a rough idea of how much sleep I've had. All right, so look, I said I wanted you to be among my 700,000 bosses, right? Now, why in the world would I want 700,000 bosses? And I've had to answer to more than one boss before in a job. It is terrible. It is terrible when you're getting conflicting orders for 2 or 3 people, much less 700,000, right? So why am I doing this? Why am I running? Well, you know, I think the best way to figure this out is to see if we're on the same page, okay? So I'd actually like to ask you guys some questions. I know it's a little bit unstandard for a job interview, but I'm going to ask you all some questions. First off, I'd like to ask, is any of you among the 10% of Americans who still thinks Congress is doing a bang-up job? Go ahead, don't be shy. You can raise your hand. Anyone in that 10%? Okay. Well, is any of you in the 90% of people who thinks that Congress is doing a terrible job? They're wasting our tax money, they're not getting anything done, and all they're doing is making excuses. Okay. All right, well, I'm in that 90% too. Now, does anybody here get pissed off pretty much every time he turns on the TV and he hears our elected officials giving a bunch of excuses for not getting the economy running again, like giving excuses is their job? Anybody else get pissed off every time? Just me? No? Okay. All right. Has anyone here ever supported a major party candidate with his time, his money, his effort, only to be disappointed in that candidate the second that candidate gets into office and does things that you just didn't think that person would ever do? Okay, well, so much for answering the question why I'm running. It seems like you guys already know. It's the same reason y'all are sitting here tonight. I'm actually kind of tempted to ask why you guys aren't running. But instead of asking that, here's what I'd like. Here's what I'd like to happen over the course of this evening. I'd like some of the folks in this room to be encouraged by this event tonight, fired up. I'd like to see names of people in this room tonight on the ballot next time. And I'd like to see the reform of Washington become a permanent platform of the pissed off here in Tennessee. All right? Now, I know you guys, I hate to use bad language, okay? Right? I know y'all are the Tea Party, right? But I consider myself to be in the party of the pissed off, right? So let's go over why I'm mad. And maybe you guys will remember why y'all are mad too. In 2008, our financial markets collapsed, okay? It turns out that all the on-paper prosperity that we saw in the financial services industry was really some kind of smoke and mirrors game sitting on a house of cards on a lot of bad bets. Washington had spent the early
30 years before that, taken all the rules out that were supposed to keep the financial system honest. By the time of the collapse, all the folks they had watching the store actually worked in the store, right? All the people they had watching Wall Street were actually from Wall Street, right? So when things started to get bad, they were all looking the other way. In 2008, the first shoe dropped. We got left holding the bag. It's been almost 4 years, but none of the banking activities that got us into this mess is illegal today. And there's still nothing in place to keep the other shoe from dropping. The banks that were so big they had to be bailed out in 2008 and 2009 are 20% bigger today than they were then. Back then, other institutions used to loan them money at super low rates because they thought the government might bail them out. Now, the rates they loan them money at are even lower because they know the federal government will bail them out. Now, let me ask you something. If you screw up, what happens to your credit rating? What happens to the rate at which you get loaned money? It goes up, right? Not down. They screwed up that now they get loaned money at cheaper rates because the federal government bailed them out and everybody knows that we, the taxpayer, are their backstop. Unemployment's still over 8%, underemployment's over 15%, and Congress and Washington haven't done anything to fix either. Now, a few things have been done. So let's look at what they have done by Washington. And these things have cost us a ton of money. First, TARP passed in October 2008. It authorized spending a total of $700 billion to bail out the banks and other companies. Now, Congress couldn't have screwed this up worse. Only after they agreed to give out our $700 billion, not theirs, did they even try to pass any amendments to keep track of where the money was going or how it was spent. They agreed to give our $700 billion away and then said, hey, maybe we ought to put some kind of thing on there to figure out where it's going. And then, when they did try to amend it to figure out where our money was going, right, most of those amendments failed. So we'll never know where our $700 billion went. We'll probably never know how much TARP money went into making Main Street worse off. Think of it. Our own tax money used to make the offending banks bigger, being used to lobby our representatives to make sure Congress doesn't keep them from screwing it up again, being used to give the banks, the CEOs of the banks that screwed it up in the first place, millions and tens of millions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses. Whew. Now I remember why we're mad. Let me put the size of TARP into perspective. $700 billion. With the same amount of money, Congress could have put 10 million Americans to work fixing roads, bridges, sewers, and all the other things we know need fixing for $50,000 for a whole year, and they'd have had $200 billion left over to buy the materials for the roads, bridges, sewers, and other infrastructure. They didn't do that. It's worse than that, though. Even though they put no restrictions on the Wall Street banks who took the TARP money, President Obama's Treasury Department actually insisted on closing hundreds of GM and Chrysler auto retail outlets. That was contrary to the advice of industry experts, and it resulted in a loss of an estimated 100,000 jobs. And it had no demonstrated increase in the economic viability of Chrysler or GM. That's just TARP. Over $4 trillion with a T has gone out the door to bail out Wall Street since 2008. That's money from the Fed, money from the New York Fed, money from the FDIC, and from the Treasury Department of 2 administrations. That's not including the so-called stimulus package. That would have been enough to put 10 million Americans to work at $50,000 a year for 5 years with $1.5 trillion left over. But that's not what Congress or either administration did with $4 trillion. They just handed the money to Wall Street, no strings attached, while Main Street suffered. President Obama's so-called stimulus plan could have been used to directly employ thousands, but instead it played right into the crony capitalism model Wall Street loves that's become the MO of both parties in DC. Instead of putting millions to work doing what needed to be done, our stimulus was just another series of handouts to campaign contributors. And somehow, those handouts were supposed to trickle down to us and create jobs. The end result, what's going on today? Well, CEOs are bringing down record paydays. Wall Street and our corporations are breaking records making profits, but nobody's hiring here in the US. There's 4 applicants for every 1 job. The bailed out companies are flush with cash, but our government is way in the red. It has much less than no money. What we have here, as some have said, is the stupidest form of socialism ever conceived. Washington has made the expense of Wall Street's losses public, spreading them among the taxpayers, while privatizing all of Wall Street's gains, letting them keep nearly every penny. That's crazy. That ought to make all of us mad. Meanwhile, the 2011 Congress was the least productive in over a decade, and the Congress of 2012 is on track to be the least productive Congress since they started keeping records in 1947. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. We still get to vote. We don't have to put up with this. We can fix this. Step 1, diagnose the problem. Am I doing all right on time? If the people in Washington were trying to fix the economy and make America a better place, then their behavior would allow us to infer that they're crazy or stupid or both. But the vast majority of people in Washington are neither. So, the primary goal of most of the members of Congress has to be something else. Let me tell you what it is. It's to get into office and stay there as long as possible. And if succeeding in this goal depends on raising millions of dollars in campaign contributions from PACs and from Wall Street, then the behavior of the people in Congress begins to make sense. Their behavior isn't nice, but at least we can see how it's rational. The people who've been in Washington for a decade, like Representative Blackburn, are doing exactly what it takes to stay in Washington. That's their goal. I'm running to shine a light on the problem, and with your help, to change things. I want to change what it takes for representatives to get to Washington. I want to change the system of legal bribery that exists in Washington, that's being used to enrich the few at the expense of the rest of us. More importantly, I want you to recognize Washington's root problem, and I want you to want to change it too. We need tighter controls on campaign finance. We need to close the revolving door so congressmen and their staffers can't work for the lobbyists who lobby those congressmen and staffers. We need term limits to prevent the possibility that service in Congress is some kind of lifelong gravy train. We need an end to no-bid contracts, especially where our national defense is at stake. We need comprehensive tax code reform, so it will be more obvious when a lobbyist is bosses. I'd love to answer directed questions on these issues and others. Half my answers probably won't be what half you want to hear, but I promise to answer your question if you promise to listen to my explanation. Let me just cut to the end here and finish with some promises that are things I can do. People usually promise things that they can't actually do. I'll be honest and transparent. I will be your personal spy in Washington, D.C. When people do bad things, when people don't show up to committee meetings, when people take visits from lobbyists and magically change their votes, I'll let you know. I'll represent everyone who lives in the district fairly. No special favors for campaign contributors. I'll represent the entire district, not just Franklin and Brentwood. I'll run an office that's fair and non-political and run as cheaply and efficiently as possible. My goal would be to get my office spending down to where Representative Desjardins has his. He's one of the most efficient offices in Congress, and I think I could try to get down there. I will not serve more than 4 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. 8 years was good enough for George Washington. It ought to be good enough for anyone. And finally, if you elect me and I go to Washington, by the end of 2 years, I will only consider myself successful if I have pissed off so many people in Washington by shining a light on what they're doing that they break every record in the book spending money trying to keep me out of Washington a second term. And I'll come back down here to my nice little place in Kingston Springs, Tennessee, and I'll sit on the back porch, and I'll show up the next time to one of these events to support one of you guys doing the same. Thank you.
Questions? Take 5 minutes, do some questions here. Try to keep it away from statements and making questions.
How would you combat the executive privilege use that Obama has started using to put his agenda off on everybody else?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know what exactly you can do from Congress. The only thing I can think of that Congress could do is censure him when he uses an executive order to do something that's beyond the powers granted to the executive in Article 2 of the Constitution, which he's done. And there hasn't been a response from Congress. You could initiate impeachment proceedings, but I think that would be an uphill. I think you'd just lose if you did that. But those are the two things I can think of right off the top of my head. The problem is those are the only two things Congress can really do to the president. I hope that answers the question. It's not a very satisfying answer.
I'm pleased that you claim that you work for us. But my bigger question is,
Well, not yet.
Well, you understand what I'm driving at. My bigger question is, you tell me that you want to represent us and represent our will. Well, let's say that we're 50-50 divided. Where are you going to find your decision, your guiding light?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question too, right? Because you can't necessarily run a congressional, you can't be a congressman who runs by opinion poll, right? And I think you're aiming at that danger right there. There's two models of Congress, of what Congress should be doing. One model says that you should figure out what most people want, and you should do that. And the other model figures out, the other model says you should try to figure out what they ought to want, what's really best, and do that, even if it isn't what they want. And then the downside is they don't vote for you the next time. I'm more partial to the second model, but where most things are concerned, I feel the same way as the residents of District 7, and to be honest with you, I think Tennessee's 7th District, I think on most issues about 60, 70% one way or the other. So that kind of makes it, I mean, that's an easy out. If we really had an issue and it was lined up 50-50, I'd just have to go with my conscience. That's all I could do.
Yes, I was trying to formulate a question to you because I followed you all the way along about Congress's percentage, how bad they're doing. But when you got into the crisis of the stimulus money, you started blame of what they did in Wall Street, banks, and so forth. But you didn't back up to the point prior to that, Dodd-Frank's bill that's issued the crisis that somebody in the banks went bankrupt because they made bad loans off of their finances, for housing.
Right.
Now, Hood and so forth. Now, my question is that, we want to go back to the source again. Congress passed laws that got us in the crisis in the first place, and then someone had to be bailed out because they had no money. It just went belly up as given loans that couldn't be secured.
No, I mean that's true, right? There's no question the fault is Congress's, right? Because it starts even earlier than that. In the early 90s, they repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, and that's when Clinton was president. And that broke the division between investment banking and normal banking. And once that division was broken, it opened up the can of worms. But so I don't blame Wall Street in a sense, right? But here's the thing. It's money from Wall Street lobbyists that got Congress to do all those things. Now, that's still Congress's fault, right? Because when a CEO sees that a dollar spent lobbying Congress has a 600 to 3,000% return on his investment, he would be irresponsible not to spend a dollar lobbying Congress, right? It's Congress's fault that they take that money and that they're so concerned with getting reelected that they basically become yes men for the people with the money. That gentleman's absolutely right. The blame is Congress's.
Simple concept. I'm wondering if the amount of courage that you have in viewing our Constitution and what this country should be. And I'll ask it this way. If you get sent up there, could your eyes be on the lookout for these kinds of people that's making the bad laws? There's been so many bad laws made. They're mistakes, each and every one of them, when you consider our Constitution. Now then, if they're going to make those mistakes, some of them are going to slip up. When you see an example of something like that, can you go to the ends of the earth and search and be able to cry the word treason?
I think so. And the reason why I say that is I once swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I went to Baghdad, and they shot at me, and they tried to blow me up. Not specifically for that oath, but I do think I have the courage in my convictions, yes.
Got a question?
I ask every politician I know, how do you stand on Agenda 21?
To be honest with you, I think Mr. Aiken was pretty, well, he was correct on that issue, right? If I understand it, Agenda 21 would have the United Nations, through treaty that we're supposed to sign on to, imposing regulations on us. Is that correct? Well, that's correct? Yeah. If that's even a little part of it, it's a no-go from the get-go. The UN wouldn't even exist except for us. We helped the world create that agency. That agency should not be over us. We have one sovereign in the United States, and that's the Constitution. And to me, that's what the rule of law means.
If the federal government came and got your property to farm a house, how would you stop it?
Is it okay to say AR-15? Is that okay?
Second Amendment covers it.
Oh, okay. Second Amendment. Yeah. We've got a nice little 5 acres. Anyway, yeah. It's got pretty good lines of sight. They'd have a hard time getting it, I suspect. I hope.
What 2 or 3 things would you do, you're only one vote in Washington, but what 2 or 3 things might you try to do to restore peace and sanity in the Middle East?
Y'all might not like this answer, but I would get us the heck out of there. I don't think peace and sanity could be restored to the Middle East. I don't think we should spend one more dollar out there. I was in Baghdad for about a year. I got to see those folks. I got to say, they can have it, as far as I'm concerned. I think we just need to protect our borders here.
One quick question. On the super committee, is that unconstitutional that they did in forming the super committee?
Actually, there's not a lot of good constitutional law on how much delegation is unconstitutional, but it might be an instance of an unconstitutional delegation of the powers that are supposed to be held by Congress under Article 1. So I think, yeah.
The same question was asked Marcia, too.
What'd she say?
Marcia said that was a constitutional committee, and it was successful because it reduced the debt by 25 million, some ridiculous low number. She thought it was a good thing.
Is that how you determine whether something's constitutional?
I'm just telling you the reply.
Sorry.
Because I asked the question.
Yeah.
It was fairly easy.
Good question.
Give this man a hand. All right, this time we're moving on forward. We'll be now moving into the U.S. Senate candidates. Our first candidate will be Dr. Sean Crowell.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity of getting to stand before you guys and speaking about liberty in our country and the passion that I have for it. Some of you might know me. I know there's a gentleman in here that knows me real well. I used to work for him over at Waverly Animal Clinic, Dr. Anderson. I appreciate him coming out and supporting me. If y'all don't know, I'm sure everybody in the community knows Dr. Anderson, a great vet, great man. I appreciate you providing for my family for so many years, and it was I enjoyed being there working at Waverly Animal Clinic. So I guess you all understand now I'm a veterinarian by training. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Dr. Sean Crow. I'm running for the United States Senate here in Tennessee. I'll be running against Bob Corker and Mr. Clayton. And, you know, I have gotten excited about politics probably the last 4 years. I've always been politically inclined, but I jumped right in. I got really upset with the banker bailout, as Jack had pointed out earlier, the TARP bill. That's what really got me energized and focused into politics. And I really started doing a lot of research in U.S. politics and U.S. history and really found out a lot of things that troubled me greatly. But let me digress a little bit and go back. I want to explain to you a little bit about me personally. I am a born-again Christian. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 3. I'm a small business owner. I own my own small business in suburban Nashville, Tennessee. And I grew up in Union City, Tennessee. Does anybody know where Union City's at? A lot of people? Good. We got a lot of geography experts in here. So I graduated from Union City High School, went to the University of Tennessee at Martin. Graduated 4 years later, went to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, got my doctorate in veterinary medicine. And I've been practicing veterinary medicine for the last 13 years. So I feel like I bring a lot to the people of Tennessee because I'm a middle-class American. I'm a lot like you guys. Bob Corker is a very wealthy man. And I don't downplay anybody that's been successful. But sometimes they lose a little bit of what we have to go through on a daily basis, do they not? And then they get up to Washington and they spend our money. Is that not right? So 4 years ago, I was looking around, and I have historically voted Republican. I've been very conservative, voted on social issues, being a born-again Christian. And I decided, you know, I started looking around 4 years ago, and I saw that this president, George W. Bush, who I voted for twice, had expanded the federal government at an alarming rate during his 8 years of presidency. And then his Secretary of Treasury, Henry Paulson, says, and so did President Bush, he said, we need to spend your money, $700 billion, and give it to failed big banks and big insurance companies. I was horrified by that. I was taken back. It shocked me because this is a man I trusted a lot. Well, here we go. You know, Barack Obama, John McCain were running, were they not? And they were running for president. You had a Democrat, you had a Republican. They were at each other's throats during that presidential campaign, were they not? And then all of a sudden, the one issue they agreed on, you know what it was? It was TARP. It was the banker bailout. They said, don't we need to vote for this? And guess what? They were both senators, and they both voted for it. How do you think Bob Corker voted, Tennessee? He voted for it, didn't he? He voted to give $700 billion of my money, your kids' money, and your grandkids' money to the failed banks and insurance companies. Lamar Alexander did the same thing. We've got 2 guys that have been very bad for Tennessee representing us. Right. Bad representatives. Right. You've heard the acronym RHINO, Republican in name only. Those 2 guys fit that very well. Yeah. And you know, Bob Corker has given over the last 6 years over $1 trillion of our money he's voted to give away to special interest groups. I mean, he's been very bad. He's agreed with Barack Obama 61% of the time these last 4 years. He has voted against the U.S. Constitution 40% of the time the last 6 years. 1% is deplorable and unacceptable. 40%, that's almost half the time. That means that Bob Corker only believes in our Constitution that our founding fathers fought and died for about 40% of the time, or 60% of the time, I guess. That's almost 50-50. That's terrible. We cannot continue to support a man who doesn't even believe in our founders' document. There's no way. And then what do we have 2 years later after the TARP? You know, Jack alluded to it earlier. We were trying to figure out where that $700 billion went to. And in 2009, actually, the Congress started subpoenaing the Inspector General of the federal government who's supposed to look over the Federal Reserve Bank. And noticed on the congressman noticed, I think he was from Florida, Alan Grayson. And he noticed on the balance sheets $1.4 trillion, not $700 billion. That was what was on the Federal Reserve Bank's balance sheets, $1.4 trillion. Because what happened was, you see, the check that was written out said, and I'm very mobile, so I'm going to maybe fade in and out, but the check that was written out in 2008, the TARP, at the bottom, Bob Corker signed his name. The checking account was the people's money. It was your money. And what was written in the blank was Federal Reserve Bank. But they didn't write $700 billion. They left it open-ended. They said, we're going to trust that you're just going to spend $700 trillion. The balance sheets at the Federal Reserve Bank showed $1.4 trillion. Double that amount. What some people have said, and Jack alluded to it, it's been as high as $9 trillion or $27 trillion is what I've heard. I've heard numbers crazy out there because we didn't just give them $700 billion. We left an open-ended check to the Federal Reserve Bank. So 2 years later, we had to send a bill through the Senate to audit the Federal Reserve Bank. How do you think Senator Corker voted? He voted to not audit the Federal Reserve. He voted to keep your money that he spent a secret from you. That's right. And so, guess what? We don't have the Federal Reserve audited. The Federal Reserve has been around as of next year for 100 years. It was an act of Congress created in 1913. And this is where I'm probably the biggest expert at, is because I've researched the Federal Reserve Bank, and I've been very shocked. Very shocked. It is a multi-trillion-dollar business. How do I know that? We've got a $16 trillion established national debt. Who do you think owns the majority of that debt? If you look at mainstream media, who would they tell you? What does the TV say? Who owns us? China. Whoa, we've been duped. They own 1.1 trillion of that 16. 1/16. And they're not buying any more. They're actually going through a housing crisis in China as we speak. China doesn't own us. The Federal Reserve Bank owns $8 trillion of that. It has been said that the Federal Reserve is as federal as Federal Express. It is a private bank. The people, and we don't know who they are because it's never been audited, the people that own it are multi-trillionaires because they have $8 trillion of our money. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's just impossible with the Federal Reserve Act. But I promise you, it is possible. And these guys, this is where we see the power structure. And this is what I noticed in 2008, that the power structure in this country was not with the people, obviously, because we kept telling Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander, don't vote for TARP. And what did? They voted for it. Everybody was agreeing. Obama was agreeing. McCain was agreeing. George W. Bush was agreeing. I mean, this was a big problem. The people who have the power in this country are the banks, are they not? I'm going to give you another example. Bill Clinton. His Federal Reserve Chairman was Alan Greenspan, right? When he got out of office and George W. Bush came in office, who was the Federal Reserve Chairman? Alan Greenspan. Whoa, Democrat, Republican. Didn't change. Didn't change. Now, Ben Bernanke's the new guy under Obama. But I bet if Mitt Romney becomes our president, Lord willing, in November, then guess what? He may just have Ben Bernanke do it. Because it seems like that our presidents bow down to these Federal Reserve chairmen like they're royalty. Yet they're the ones that appoint them. It is a strange situation that I encourage each of you to check out. The Federal Reserve is a private bank. And the bad thing about it, when you look at the history of it, is it was an act of Congress created on December 23rd, 1913, 2 days before Christmas, 1913. How many senators and congressmen do you think were in Washington to vote on that? There wasn't many. Charles Lindbergh, do you remember the famous aviator Charles Lindbergh? His dad was a congressman from Minnesota. He stood on the floor in 1913 in the Capitol building, and he said, if we vote for this Federal Reserve Act, and he was debating the bill, the Federal Reserve Bill, he said, we're going to create a monstrosity of a power organization that we cannot get hold of. And he was right. He was very right. And so that's what's happened. And so these guys have been fighting it for years. Now, we see a problem in this country. Corker voted for this. He voted to not audit the Federal Reserve. He voted for the banker bailout right away. And the third big thing I'm upset with him about is he voted for the National Defense Authorization Act that they voted on actually last year in the Senate, which says in sections 1021, 1022, that any U.S. citizen, not terrorist, mind you, but U.S. citizen, that commits a belligerent act can be arrested by our military, held indefinitely without a trial, without a lawyer, without a phone call. That's an attack on our Constitution. That's an attack on our Bill of Rights.
Right.
That is the most dangerous legislation that has ever come out because that attacks our freedoms, folks. And Bob Corker voted for it. Obama signed it into law on January 1st, 2012. While you and I were watching college football games and enjoying our family, Obama was hard at work taking away your freedoms. And see, this is the problem. Corker has agreed with Obama too much. We can't keep him in office. We can't afford to. Now, what's my plan? What am I going to do to change things? Well, my biggest thing, let's turn the economy around. You know, and how do we do that? We were talking about it earlier. I think Jack and the gentleman over here were talking about it. The thing that really got the subprime mortgage debacle going was in 1999, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999. And what it effectively did was destroy Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. The Glass-Steagall Act, folks, what it did effectively was separate commercial banks and investment banks. They couldn't be married together because when they do, they're too powerful. And they start basically doing fraudulent activity. So Congressman Glass and Steagall, both of these guys realized in 1933, 4 years after the Great Depression, that we have to have this legislation in place to keep these entities separated. Well, guess what? In 1999, under President Bill Clinton, he signed this law. The unfortunate thing, it was bipartisan activity. It was Graham, Leach, and Bliley. All three of those guys were Republicans. Republican congressmen and a Democrat president agreed to destroy us with the subprime mortgage debacle because of what it allowed the investment banks and the commercial banks to marry. So things like Citibank and Travelers Group can now merge together. By the way, a little outside detail there is Citibank and Travelers Group actually merged in 1998, 1 year before this was ever signed into law. So they did it illegally. When the Securities and Exchange Commission was questioning it and the Department of Justice was about to prosecute it, guess who stepped in and told them to stop? The Federal Reserve Bank. Yeah, the board of directors just said, don't worry about it. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank's a private bank. How in the world did they have the authority to tell our Securities and Exchange Commission and Department of Justice not to start looking at things? But yet, it was finalized 1 year prior to the passage of the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. We've got some problems in this country, folks. We've had them for over 100 years. We have had serious problems for the last 12 years. If you wanted a recipe on how to destroy our economy, then just look at what happened the last 12 years. I mean, these guys have looked like they have purposefully destroyed our economy. And so that's what I'm about. I'm about going in as your senator and repealing Graham-Leach-Bliley. I'm going to repeal Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm going to repeal Dodd-Frank. Repeal, repeal, repeal. We have created disasters with all of this legislation. If we get the government out of the people's business, then the economy will prosper because we have a great infrastructure. We have the most powerful nation on earth, and we can do this. But you're going to have to get up. You're going to have to elect liberty-minded candidates like myself who will stand for you and be a man of the people.
Harry Reid and the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate have worked right along with Mr. Obama and not had a budget. That way, as I understand it, Mr. Obama can spend the money any way he doggone well pleases. Am I not correct on that?
It looks like that's the way he's doing.
It certainly seems to be it. Now, the thing that I'm wondering, as an independent, how does that affect the control of the Senate? You know, if we fiddle around somewhere or another and Harry Reid gets back in there, right, we've had it.
Well, as an independent senator, I promise you there's never an instance where I agree with Harry Reid. So The Republicans and the conservatives won't lose any control in the U.S. Senate with me being there.
He's talking about setting up the committees. The party majority sets up the chairman of the committee and whatnot.
Yes. So, I think here's the thing. The power of the Senate is pretty cool. It's a little different than the House of Representatives. We have filibuster opportunities. So if we can't get a balanced budget passed, guess what? As your U.S. Senator, I can get up and start talking about trains in America and Thomas the Train. I can talk about anything with filibuster power. We can delay a vote just by talking and talking and talking. And there's been many historical instances where senators have talked for over 20 hours to try to get their point across that, hey, we're not going to stop what we're doing until we get something done. And that's the power of the Senate over the House of Representatives.
This is probably as close as I'm ever going to get to a U.S. Senator. But I did want to talk about something that's happening right now in the arming all the agencies, the weathermen and the IRS and the Social Security Administration, and providing all of this ammunition. Now, I feel that the Senate and the Congress have subrogated their authority to the executive branch. And I'm wondering, what could you do in the Senate, or what would you do in this situation as far as your own authority?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. The Department of Education has a SWAT team. Why does the Department of Education need a SWAT team? Why does the Department of Agriculture need a SWAT team? The executive branch has usurped their authority, and that's the president. The president has gone beyond what his authority is. The power of the Senate, the power of the Congress is very easy. We give the money through the Constitution. We have the right to defund anything we want to that the president's doing. We just have to vote on it. Defund it. And my thought is, let's balance the budget. How are we going to balance the budget? We're going to have to cut spending, not raise your taxes. Here's the problem with big government. Bob Corker's big government. He's going to grow the government. His Cap Act that he's said he wants is to basically keep spending at $3.5 trillion. The problem is, as a tax structure, we only pull in $2.4 to $2.5 trillion a year. We're overspending $1 trillion, and it's for ammunition and crazy things like that, and SWAT teams that, why do organic farmers need an M16 or some new machine gun pointed at their head and put down just because they're growing Monsanto corn? But yet that's what's happening. And so we've got to defund these and streamline these departments. And the Congress has the power to do that. The Congress has the power over the budget.
I have a question first on, you're a Christian.
Yes,
and
sir.
As a Christian, do you hate any man?
No.
Right. Well,
1 John says no.
This comes into my question then. There's three issues of God. One is abortion, the other is homosexuality, and the other is back in Israel. Those are three God issues. And you elaborate on how you stand on all three of those, but against what people do, it might be hate. But against the individuals that do it, I do not hate.
Yeah, so socially, I am pro-life. And so as a born-again Christian, I love and fear God. And so I'm for life. And as a scientist, even as a veterinary scientist, we know that life begins at conception. We know that scientifically. So it's amazing for me to see some of these university professors who teach on biology sit there and say that it's a woman's choice and it's not murder when they know scientifically it's murder. Life begins at conception. So we've got to protect that. That is the number one social issue we have to go out. I am obviously pro-Israel. They're our ally. If Israel gets attacked, we go in militarily. That is what we do as an ally, and that's what we should always do. And as far as the homosexual issue, I look at it this way, and it's a little different take. I look at it historically. Who decided who got married in the past, in the 1700s in this country? Do you know? Who did? Parents? The individuals involved in the church, right? You know when the government got involved? It was local governments making money from marriage licenses. It was a money thing. And then all of a sudden the federal government really got involved, especially in the early 1900s through the Social Security Act, the income tax. They started wanting to know who's head of household. It all became from this tax thing. It was a government thing to get money from the people. It's a money maker. We have to take the government out of everything, including marriage. Let the people decide who gets married, okay? Not the government. It's not the federal government's job to do that. And as far as the income tax goes, I will, as your senator, do everything I can to repeal the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which is the income tax, and institute a fair tax with a maximum ceiling of 17%, and no future Congresses can raise that tax but only lower that tax.
One more question?
You know, during this voting season and all, I've heard a lot of people getting up that are running for office, and all of them that I have heard, the only thing that they address is the middle class. Well, there's a whole lot more people under the middle class than there is at it and above it. What would be your plan to help those people that are not middle class and will never get there?
Right. Well, as far as entitlements go, I'm not an entitlement guy. You won't get entitlements from me because it's not the government's job to help the poor people. If the government would get out of all the people's business, what would happen is our economy would be stimulated. More poor people would have the opportunity for more jobs. And if anybody is disabled or poor, you know whose job it really is as a born-again Christian? It's the church's job.
Church, that's right.
Because if I give you something voluntarily, hey, that is from my heart and that's okay. But if the government's forcing me to give you money, that's a different story. And that's the problem. The government wants to give entitlements. They want to force the people to give to the poor. It's not the government's business. Get the government out of our business. Is that it? Last question. I just want to say I've been endorsed by Zach Poskovich. So, and obviously he's from Humphreys County. And so Zach and I think a lot alike, and I would love to have your vote, donations, and support. Let's get the Constitution. Let's get our country back to the people, okay?
All right, we'll take just a couple minutes here before we get our last speaker up. The girls are handing out ballots. Anybody here tonight's eligible to vote in this ballot? It's most of you that are not normal participants are Tea Party people. We appreciate your input on these issues. Our last speaker is Mr. Mark Clayton. Mr. Clayton is the official Democratic nominee running on the U.S. Senate seat. Regardless of what you heard in the news, he is the official. He won it. He's the official nominee for the Democratic Party. And I have tried and tried to get a Democrat to come in here and speak before this bunch. With the exception of Mr. Tidwell, this is the first gentleman that's blessed us. Mr. Roy Herring was conservative enough to come here and speak and wouldn't do it. I just don't understand. But we're blessed to finally get one out, and we're honored to have him.
I'm greatly honored to be here today. First of all, I'd like to ask how many military veterans do we have here? Show of hands. Military veterans. Thank you. It's an honor to speak before you today. I suited up for 6 years in the Army Reserves. It was not a very descriptive occasion because it was between the two Gulf Wars, but I think that serving in the military is something that most people should consider. However, with all of our involvements in foreign wars and the misinformation that we've been fed by our leaders and the declarations that we're supposed to be in foreign wars continuously, this is one of the main things that is driving up our debt. This false debt, as Dr. Crowell points out, and is running our country into the ground. That money could be spent on a lot of other things, and we could work on defense policies that would work a lot better by isolating the terrorists instead of going on massive campaigns. Al Santoli, this is just some new news for our campaign, is our senior foreign policy advisor. He works for the Asia American Initiative. He's a decorated Vietnam War veteran, and he's out in jungles and countries all over throughout the year setting up medicine and schools to give people opportunities. And what this does is they've found a way to isolate the bad apples, the terrorists, let the sediment fall to the bottom, and then the government could call in the Navy SEALs. How does that sound? It's really happening. He's our Rambo, but he goes out with medicine. He doesn't kill people. But his name is Al Santoli. You can look him up. He's officially on our campaign. I was going to give a speech on some things that we believe in on our campaign, but I felt that it would be better to give you a report on our political activities because that's the type of life that I've led. My father was a 27-year religious liberty lobbyist in Washington, D.C. He died in 2004. I grew up in Washington, D.C., actually on the Alexandria, Virginia side of the D.C. area. My father was from Alabama. He grew up in a shack. My mother was from South Carolina. She was the belle of the ball, and Dad snagged her. And so I grew up southern, right outside of Washington, D.C., going and lobbying with my father starting around the age of 3 or 4 in a 3-piece suit throughout all the halls of Congress. So I became very familiar with the Washington setup in a very early age, started hearing major policy speakers speak. It was much over my head at the time, and it takes a while to mature and come into your own. But needless to say, some of these friends of my father's are still around, and with our victory in the Democratic primary, it's brought a lot of those friends back together to join in this effort. The efforts that I've dedicated to myself to in my political life have been practical political efforts that will have a real effect. I've seen both sides of political effectiveness, and I've looked at George Washington's view that he understood power. He understood that what you have to do has to have a real result. He understood talent, he understood people, and he understood organization. That is what's critical in politics. Without organization of people, without actual power, there is no result in politics, whether it's negative or positive. And what I set out to do in my adult political life was to build on the experience that I had being taught by Washington super sleuths, working with people, even working on the trade and economic issues, such as the Federal Reserve in the summer of 2001 in Washington, D.C., with an economic historian named William J. Gill. What I did after lobbying Congress on terrorism as just a teenager with Ben Parton, after trying to talk to my professors about George Soros in the late 90s, and singling some of these things out before a lot of other people did, and hanging out with a lot of learned gentlemen and who had really studied these issues and knew that these issues were coming down the pike, what that did for me is it built a basis that when I got to Tennessee and I started engaging in politics, there was something that had to happen. So 4 years ago, and I have been a Democrat and I'm a pro-life and a pro-traditional marriage Democrat, which obviously has sold very well. We're the nominee. But as I set out in Tennessee to engage in politics, I measured the cost. I looked at what would it take in blood and treasure and sweat. And I went out to my neighborhoods near me. Where I couldn't go, I tried to reach people electronically and through their friends, and I asked them, do you agree with us? If you agree with us, will you vote for us? And when the polls came in 4 years ago, we garnered over 32,000 votes on what people now consider Tea Party issues. And that was before Hank Paulson, before the bailout. Tennessee Democrats were voting on these issues. We were warning of an impending financial collapse, saying that we needed to have financial reforms or else The United States might not be able to pay its debts to China, might not be able to pay its debts at all. And sure enough, we're looking now at raising the debt ceiling. So we've continued to run on these issues. We've continued to run on pro-traditional marriage issues, and we've had a lot of success with Democratic voters who believe like we do. The problem in Tennessee is not whether or not we can all get on the right page as far as theories go, as far as political ideology goes. The problem is whether or not, because we have that. We have the talent there. We have people like Dr. Crowell. We have people like Zach Poskovich. But the problem is we have this big brick wall. We have Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander, millions of dollars, and somehow they're able to get dedicated support to come out with them and get them back in office to put in these same policies that we know don't work. And we all are sitting here tonight talking as a Tea Party, which again, I'm honored to be here, and how these policies are destroying our country. But we have to have a political answer to be able to get in a position of power where we can remove our malefactors. And Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander are the malefactors, the political malefactors of Tennessee. They are damaging this state. They are hurting us. They are driving your children into untenable debt. They are ruining this country's future. For what? For what? And, you know, Democrats across Tennessee have spoken. We see on the far left of the Democratic Party downtown where they have control of the headquarters, we see where they had run a third-place candidate, and I respect her for running on her issues and being who she is. But we have a far left who is racist, and I will use the word. They're racist enough to believe that a majority of minority voters should be in constant servitude to support their agenda for gay marriage and abortion on demand. Well, Tennessee Democrats came out to the polls. They knew who they were voting for, and candidates who were first and second place, and they said no. They said, we're not voting for those things. So there is a political change that has happened in Tennessee, and we have a chance to win, but we have to get together politically. And I've talked to as many leaders as I can to say, we need you. We have many Democratic voters who have gone to the polls in show of force, and they have repudiated the far left policies of their party. Utterly repudiated. What you may not know, and what the news does not want you to know, or much of the media does not want you to know, is that the runner-up and I have been on good terms from 4 years ago. He is also for traditional marriage. He is also pro-life, and he also believes a lot of the things that the Tea Party believes about the need for financial reforms. So he has endorsed our campaign. That means if you want to just go by the votes of the first three top vote getters in the Democratic Party, our ideas outnumber the far lefts in Tennessee, all of their voters, by 3-1. And that's excluding any of the other candidates who were in the Democratic Party primary who were pro-traditional marriage or pro-life. And we've had to fight a lot on that one issue because it's been blown up and magnified because of my involvement in the pro-family group. But in my past, there's not enough time for me to detail all of my past in Washington. I have a lot of experience, a lot of connections with patriotic people in Washington who work on the issues and refuse to sell out. They're too numerous to name. I'm on the phone with them regularly, and that apparatus is coalescing around our campaign. We have an enormous brain trust there. I like to think that I can contribute to it a little bit. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a coalition in this state based on our hard-won and difficult successes to defeat Bob Corker, to remove Lamar Alexander. I'll digress. I'll even go back and say before during my campaign, a lot of people talked about how we hadn't updated our website. That's because I work, usually a full-time job. I've even worked 75 hours a week sometimes this summer, 75, 80 hours a week. Hard labor, moving. I found the time to work with a group not affiliated with the campaign, a nonprofit group, of which I'm known now as the vice president, widely known, to go downtown and work on a bill which would prohibit our schools from teaching homosexuality to our young people. We went downtown and people said, no, that's not happening. We're not trying to do that. And I was there personally to say, oh, yes, you are. Here's the curriculum from the Southern Poverty Law Center called Teaching Tolerance. And you might want to write that down and look it up on your Google. It's called Teaching Tolerance. And what they have is this is an organization that has a standing war chest of $200 million. They operate off of the interest on it. It used to be a great organization. They almost single-handedly took down the Ku Klux Klan, and I'll applaud them for that any day. But what they've done is they've sold out to the radical homosexuals. They have these curriculums in waiting, and we went in to push this bill we call the Classrooms Protection Act, which others have been calling "Don't Say Gay." We don't call it that. But we exposed that this was going on. We exposed that not only Tennessee was targeted, but every state in the union was targeted. And last year I was able to help get the word out, and we have about 100,000 supporters outside of my campaign strictly on this one issue with some of my allies. And we were able to get that pushed through the Senate last year. We thought it was a shoo-in, but we've talked a lot about Bob Corker, we've talked a lot about the banks. Let's talk about our governor, Bill Haslam. Bill Haslam personally. And I'm telling you this as a primary source who was there, talking to legislators, finding out. It was my job to find out what was happening politically. Bill Haslam himself ordered his lieutenants, Beth Harwell, Richard Montgomery, who lost. We might have had a little to do with that personally, outside, it's just friends of mine and I. But yeah, we've been around this year. But Bill Haslam personally tried to stop us every step of the way. We had to fight every hedgerow to get Senator Campfield's Classrooms Protection Act pushed through. Now, I'll have to revert and go back. Last year when everybody was saying there was no homosexual education being considered, as soon as the Senate passed Senator Campfield's bill last year, just a few months later, California passed mandatory homosexual education for all grades, kindergarten through 12th. And our question is, why can't these people stay away from our children when we say no?
That's right. That's good.
People in this state do not want their children indoctrinated with an ungodly and unchristian viewpoint, which we are taught not to believe in. That violates every religious principle that this country was founded on, liberty of conscience. And I will tell you this, no matter what happens in this election, no matter who decides to support our candidacy, no matter what anybody in my campaign does or doesn't do, if I'm alive, I'm going to be back down there. I'm going to be making sure that this type of legislation passes. I'm already talking to the other Senator Campfield. His name is Steve Cookson in Missouri, about his similar bill. And I'll go ahead and proudly announce, because my personal philosophy as being raised as a Baptist is to do things in the light, not in the shadows. We intend to make a national movement out of classrooms protection. And there are other courageous leaders in other states who are beginning to see this issue, beginning to see the vituperation of the radical homosexual groups. And this is not to say we're not looking for picking on individuals that we disagree with, but we're talking about groups who are pushing us to whatever limit they can to have homosexual indoctrination in our schools, regardless of whether or not we say no. Now, I'm with you all on the big banks. I'm with you all on the financial reforms. I I know Dr. Crowell from attending and being friends with people in the Campaign for Liberty. I think anywhere that anybody, where you have Americans talking about the banking system, it's very healthy. We need that because it used to be, like in 2001, when I was working with my friend Bill Gill, that we couldn't get Americans talking about economic issues because times were good. We were living on big credit and big spending, and people didn't want to believe that it wasn't real. I'm not talking about anybody in specific, but it's just easy to believe that it's going to last. But now we're having some warnings. And what a lot of people don't realize is the world financial system almost collapsed in 1997 due to, believe it or not, the Thai baht. And you could do a whole study on your own about that. I can't get into that today. There's a whole PBS series on it. But there are major financial reforms that need to be taking place in this country. I believe that the Campaign for Liberty and the Ron Paul people are talking the most about that. And that's why I've affiliated with them outside of my Democratic Party involvement, because I think that type of talk is needed. But politically, as far as power is concerned, as far as replacing Bob Corker is concerned, we have never grabbed anybody running for office and said, vote for us. I want your answer now. The way we have campaigned is we went door to door. We literally campaigned like Davy Crockett. We went out and shook voters' hands. We looked them in the eye. We said, this is what we believe. This is the day to vote. Would you please join us and vote for us and tell your friends? And here we are. The next step, we have the ideology. We have the people in this room, some of the people in this room, to take to Washington. What we need to do is we need to go ahead and develop and continue to develop a political coalition which can unseat Bob Corker, unseat Bill Haslam, and unseat Lamar Alexander. Thank you.
Two quick questions.
Oh, you got two?
Are you a Christian?
Absolutely.
Will you give me your word as a Christian, as a gentleman, that you would vote against any anti-biblical and unconstitutional democratic legislation?
Yes.
Where you stand on illegal immigration?
We can't have illegal immigration or immigration reform until we secure our borders. We can't even go to the table to talk about what we're going to do, DREAM Acts, whatever, until we secure our borders. My good friend Patrick Callahan is a former JAG attorney, and he's working in immigration in Texas. He said, Mark, we've got to get you up there because you've got to help me fix this. He said there are too many criminals coming in, and Mexico is exporting its unemployment, and they're exporting their criminals. And we're going to need to have to take them to the table and say, look, if you keep this up and you don't help us secure the borders and control this, you're going to have to pick up some of the tab.
I have a two-part question. One is, tell us what makes you a Democrat. And the other is, can you compare yourself to Sean Crowell, your similarities and your differences?
I don't like to compare myself to Dr. Crowell. I just like to say that I respect him a lot. I did ask him to join our efforts in the Democratic Party, and I think he's a great family man, and in a lot of ways I look up to him. So to compare myself to him, I think that's, I don't think I can compare myself.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean for you to compare yourself to him personally. I'm just talking about the issues.
I think we're on the same side generally on issues. I think that it's just a matter of which direction we're going to pull. Politically, as far as what I was talking about, power, people, coalition, that's the question.
And we do appreciate your social views, but could you tell us what makes you a Democrat?
Absolutely. Andrew Jackson led the Battle of New Orleans. He also beat the Indians at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. But he considered his greatest battle to be defeating Nicholas Biddle in his attempt to create a national bank the equivalent of our today's Federal Reserve. And we're engaged in that same struggle, and we can look to Andrew Jackson, we can look to his principles, and we can defeat this bank again for the second time. The other thing is that I am strong on working class issues. I do believe in stronger protections for minorities in the legal realm against things like malicious sentencing. 3 strikes, you're out. I think that you do find civil rights violations and that we have to be on guard. I don't see those types of things happening in the Republican Party. And I do agree with, regardless of what anybody thinks of him, I do hold Martin Luther King in high regard as far as what he did for America. And he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So when somebody's being sentenced for 10 extra years, that's an awful lot of time. And we know from statistics that's the case. People are not even disputing that. They're just saying whether or not they think something can be done about it. I think there can be something done about it. And thank you.
It's been stated here tonight about you that you belong to a hate group. Now, I want to ask you the same question, and I'll rephrase it a little different than I did the doctor. Do you hate a homosexual?
No.
Thank you. That's a very good question, because people think because we're against homosexuality or hate homosexuality that we're against the person, and that's what I wanted to clear up, because
right.
A lot of people always want to relate us to hate people when we don't hate people. We hate what they do wrong.
Well, we found out that Bill Haslam hates our group this year.
Yes.
That's about the closest we can get. We sure smoked him out, didn't we?
Just real quick. First of all, when I listen to your platform, I can't help but feel like you're on the wrong ticket. Okay? Now, I'm just being honest. Okay? Now, I respect you. I respect you to come here and speak. And I tell you what, that's a blessing in itself. But here's my question. You seem to fit our moral values. So, most of our moral values are social values and maybe even our fiscal values. But when I look at the people like Nancy Pelosi and Mr. Reid and Barbara Boxer and the list just goes on and on and on and on. How can you, as a conservative Democrat, battle against your own party and expect to make any headway?
Well, what we did is we took the message that you just described to Democrats in Tennessee, and overwhelmingly in the Democratic strongholds, voters overwhelmingly repudiated the policies of Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid because they did know who they were voting for.
I have two questions here. The first is, how would you stand on repealing Obamacare?
I do think that the thing is just a gigantic mess, and it's going to cost too much. It has to be repealed. We do need medical bankruptcy reform, so that a different type of reform that does not penalize someone if they have, so they don't lose everything they have if they get cancer. Our health system, as far as how to pay for it, the insurance part is deeply flawed as it is. And I do think that we could at least debate and start looking at wellness programs to keep people from being sick in the first place. That's going to cost a lot less because we're already spending the money to keep the hospitals open. All that's there. We just need to really get our statisticians and the right people in Washington together, aggregate all these facts, and come up with something that's not such a big monstrosity.
The second question would be, and you can tell me if this is incorrect, but you were quoted as saying that you were very close to voting for Obama this time if he would come off of his same-sex marriage stand. I saw in 2008 you said you voted for Chuck Baldwin, who was the Constitution Party nominee, which platform is to restore American jurisprudence to its biblical foundation and to limit the federal government to its constitutional boundaries. To me, if you're for somebody like that, how could you even consider voting for Obama? I don't understand that part.
Well, there's a certain aspect to what I talked about, political power, and there is an aspect to the being in a party apparatus where you don't overstep. The first rule of politics is know your position, and my position is a lot smaller than either Mitt Romney's or Barack Obama's. And a lot of my supporters are Barack Obama supporters. And I saw it coming that he was going to come out for gay marriage, before he entered office. But it's hard to break that to everybody. We don't even have the information apparatus. So to get in a fight with Obama when I'm in the Democratic Party is counterproductive to what we're doing in Tennessee. And to come out and endorse Obama, I just don't see that happening because I don't see him coming off of his stances. And he has a lot of other things that trouble me on the same level that they trouble everyone here. And I mean that. But again, it goes back to George Washington. He understood power. He understood what he could do, and he understood what he couldn't do. And it gets to the point, my dad, I may be going long on the answer, but my father used to get really upset about some of the things George Bush did. And he came to me one day and he said, you know what? I started feeling a whole lot better when even though he knew all the same things he knew, he said, when I just started praying for him. And I'm not saying that to sound corny or evasive, but there comes a time where, just like in the Bible, you're not Cyrus, you're not the king of Babylon, or you're not Nebuchadnezzar. You know who has more power than you do, and you have to put that to God. So I'm not going to fight Obama. I'm just one nominee out of, for 1% of the Senate, and I'm not even elected. So it's a position issue. I mean, from a position issue from a sense of power. You have to respect power even when it's not being handled correctly, because it is what it is. It's power. Thank you.
Been a full slate tonight. Get your ballots done. The girls will come around, pick them up. We've got a few minutes to tally them. We'll kill a little time. I'll talk about, we decided to join up into the 7th Congressional District Tea Party. I'll explain a little bit about that. That encompasses the 7th Congressional District, all of the counties. The purpose of these coalitions are to not infringe on the sovereignty of this group or any group within the coalition. That above all, needs to stay independent, because we do things different than Kirk Blackwood does, or Dixon does, or Murray does, but we are all within the 7th Congressional District. So if we can run up 12 counties participating in a coalition, and we set Marsha Blackburn down, and we talk about the NDAA or the debt ceiling raise, she breaks out in a sweat when I talk to her about it, but she knows there's nothing I can do about it. When she's sitting in front of 11 or 12 county leaders, she's the one sweating. Because now she knows that the strength we're gathering and the amount of knowledge we've acquired on how to push legislation. There's a lot of us that know a lot of congressmen point blank. You don't think so? When they see you at Chick-fil-A, their head snaps back because they might not remember your name, but they know where this shirt belongs and what it stands for. When they see you coming in the elevator, headed for the elevator, you know you're doing good when they're pushing the button 5 times. They're trying to get that door shut before you get in that elevator with them because they know what they're going to hear. We'll talk a little bit about this election cycle. The conservative groups are fairly responsible for taking out 7 of the top rhinos at the legislation. And when you get the feedback from the caucus, they're in disarray over this. So what we've done
we've built respect. With respect comes fear. Now, what Mr. Clayton talked about, I don't know this gentleman. I've just met him in the last little while. But I was pushing that same bill that he was pushing. And our paths probably crossed in the hall. But I didn't know who he was. But if we can put a coalition together of 11 to 12 to 14 groups pushing that legislation, and be it Lori Day or John Tidwell, when legislation comes forward, John knows who I am. He learned to know me pretty quick. If he'd never been at this thing ever, he'd have got tired of looking at me last round. Because he knows he might not agree with me 100% of the time. But he knows I'm a-watching, and he knows he's going to have to deal with me. And that's just the way it is. Because he's my guy. So, if we can put those kind of efforts together to put 14 groups working on 2 or 3 pieces of legislation, that's it, 2 or 3. Now, if it was to be this gentleman's bill, fine. If it was to be Joe Carr's immigration bill, we've never been riper than anyone for that right now. What's the governor going to do? Governor going to give them driver's licenses? Got 1.8 million out there taking Tennessee jobs. So what are we going to do? We're going to give them driver's licenses? He ain't talking about it. So that's the kind of stuff we need to hook up together on and push. I don't want counties coming up here running this meeting. That ain't what it's all about. What this is about is applying massive force on a couple designated issues. And the way this thing works is you have to be in 100% agreement. If we pick 3 pieces of legislation to run, everybody at that thing has to be in 100% agreement on those issues. And the first one of those things I set in, it took 6 hours to get the mission statement wrote down. 6 hours. Because basically of one libertarian who had an issue with the way we worded Judeo-Christian belief. And there was a little girl come in there and said that she got down on the floor and she prayed. And within 5 minutes we fixed that. And we got it worded in a way that he could eat it up and we could live with it. So it can happen. You can get 100, because he wasn't budging. I'll give him one thing. He wasn't coming off that stance. It was like 30 to 1, and he was holding on. But we made it work. Wouldn't it be nice if Congress could do that? But we made it work, so this can happen. And I think the 100% is very important. I think listing the groups that within your letterhead is very important because you're not trying to perceive you're something you're not. And when you lay it down in front of a legislator, he knows who this is exactly. So, some of these groups that are in the 7th that haven't been talked about this much, I'm probably going to be coming down to see you all, and we're going to be talking about it. The next meeting of the 7th will be held here in Humphrey County, out at the Loretta Lynn Restaurant out on 40. I tried to get it down here in the middle, and we're going to go down the lower end of the state and see if we can't bring up Lewis and some of these counties to at least set in on a meeting and see what they think. Because if we're going to join up that way, we need to get some kind of a formation intact pretty quick so we can pick legislation for the next session, which has to be, and you'll say, well, that don't happen, it has to be till January. No. If we pick an immigration bill, or if we pick a law enforcement issue within this coalition, if I like a bill Virginia passed that says if you perform an abortion in the state of Virginia, your facility has to meet hospital standards. So if I was going to pursue that and say Murray County was involved, what would we do? I come straight down to Trish and we go see Joey Hensley, Dr. Joey Hensley,
And we would try to get him to sponsor that bill because he's on the health committee. Don't try to get John to sponsor the bill because he's on environment. Now, if we want to go after the governor's stream mitigation bill, we might go get John. But within every bill that we would look at, within the 7th, there would probably be a legislator in our districts that you can go get to sponsor these things and at least get somebody to sponsor it that's in the committee it's going to run in first. There's where your strength comes from. So if anybody has any complaints over that, if anybody has any complaints over the changes we talked about at the beginning, get a hold of me and Joe, any of us. And if anybody has any questions right now, let's hear it. You ask me and I'll tell you something. It might not be right, but I'm going to tell you something because I'm that kind of guy. I'll tell you something. This is the way I do it, Trish.
The one concern that we had in Murray County about a coalition was the written word going out on opinion. And most of us really felt that we wanted to make sure that we agreed with what was sent out. That means that our name, Murray County, was on there. Somebody from Murray County gave you the consensus that, yeah, Murray County agreed. Now, I'm not sure if those bylaws...
It's absolutely set up that way. It has to be 100%. Nobody within the coalition, no member, no group or member of a group will be allowed to represent any member within the coalition without 100% agreement and approval from the group. So that includes press releases. That includes legislators. Now that doesn't mean Murray County can't go fight a piece of legislation they believe in. And that don't mean personally. Me as a person, I won't go down there. And if we don't pick up Joe Carr's immigration, I'm going to be down there doing it myself. I'm going to be all over that thing because I think that's an important one this time. And we have enough people down there now, off and on, that we are recognized. I think sometimes we have to handle ourselves a little more dignified. You can't go down there and threaten these people. You got to be civil. You need to take a little course put on by Bobby Petray that tells you how to talk to legislators. Because she was doing it when she was talking to about 90% Democrats, and she was still doing it, and she was liked, and she's very much liked because she handles herself very professionally, and we can get it done like that. If I want to get an appointment with these people, I usually get it. And sometimes I don't have to make it ahead of time. But what happens is with this stuff is that when your bill rolls into committee, sub ain't too bad. When it comes out in full committee, there's about 13 or 14 of them sitting there. I can't get appointments at that time of year especially to talk to about 2 of them a day, maybe 3. But if Trish wants to take on 3 one day, I take on 3, Kirk takes on 3, Jim Bourne takes on 3, we'll cover that whole committee in 2 days. And we need to do that 2 days before they come in, they take that bill into committee. Then I'm coming back here and having you boys make the phone calls because I know y'all can do it. The governor knows you can do it too. So at that point, we can be a very effective. The 8th did that last year on the sheriff's bill, and I was extremely impressed because they went down there in a couple days and covered the whole committee. That's Republicans, Democrats, everybody. They covered everybody, and it helped. It helped. And it just it lets us get it done better. And don't think these guys don't talk in the bathroom, in the elevator. So when they come in there, they say, what are you hearing on the sheriff's bill? Well, there was a guy come in and talk to me the other day representing the 7th. That's 14 groups. I got the letterhead right, and it's in the letterhead every time. Here it is. It's in the letterhead. Getting any phone calls? Yeah. Sometimes I feel sorry for the girls. You know, when I stick the phone calls on them, sometimes I know it. They got a lot to do. They'd rather see the emails, but they got to pick up that phone. Plus, it gives you a chance to grade your representatives workers? Are they civil? Do they answer the phone? When I'm in there talking to them, phone's ringing, they ain't picking it up. I'm like, you getting that? I know who it is already. They're just ringing the phone off the hook today. Nah, it ain't what I sent you there for. And this stuff of not allowing votes to happen because the governor doesn't like it, he has his own things to worry about. He'll have a lot to worry about probably in 2014. So my legislator, when I tell them, I convince them that this is a great bill on Tuesday, and they agree with me. And when they come out of the caucus meeting on Thursday morning and it's not good anymore, they've been hammered. That's what got Deborah Maggart thrown out. Now, why did Deborah Maggart not let the parking lot bill come to a vote? If they voted on it, the NRA was going to grade them. The governor didn't want it. And I could say Beth didn't want it, but Beth is the governor. She's cloned. Beth, unfortunately, is an appendage of Bill Haslam. So it works like that. So I'll give them one thing. If they want to make a statement, this year they did it. They took out the caucus head. They took out Mr. Montgomery, Cobb, some of them old dogs that did the work for the governor, because they quit doing their job and moved into doing the governor's work. We sent you there to vote. Vote. Vote your heart. And say if John voted on two things that I didn't like the other year, and we come in and we sat down and we talked about it. Hey, it is what it is. And he did pretty good on a couple for a Democrat. And and that's what it's all about. But I'm going to make myself understood. And then if this legislator doesn't do what I need him to do, he better be able to explain it to me so that I at least understand his position thoroughly. And it needs to be something more than the governor said. Now, I had a couple of them tell me that. Actually, I had Mr. Somerville tell me that. So we know the governor don't like this thing. I go, I don't care, Jim. I don't care. But hopefully we can make that difference. And what I see out of these coalitions is the power to get that done. And we can cross counties when it comes to getting people elected. I mean, if we got a hot race somewhere, a bunch of us can ride down and knock doors for Trish, for Joey Hensley maybe. Go down and knock doors for anybody. We can cross counties to do that. Phone calls can be done from anywhere. So if you guys got a problem with us joining up or a problem over the way we're structuring things these days, you got to let me know. You got to let me know. And I promise you, whatever comes out on that tech over there with the legislative priorities, that's what I'm taking to the 7th. Whatever comes up top dog over there. Now, when it says 10th Amendment, that gives me a whole lot of room to play with that. I mean, we need a whole lot of 10th Amendment legislation. We need a whole lot of 10th Amendment legislation. So I'll just pick out a good 10th Amendment piece, and I think we haven't really decided between the 7th and the 8th how we'll do things, but I think the 7th will have some legislation of their own, and I think the 8th will have some legislation of their own, and they'll probably help support some of ours, and we'll help support some of theirs. I think it's a waste of time for the whole state to push two pieces of legislation. I think with large groups like we hopefully will have, that we have the ability to push more than two pieces of legislation effectively. And for those of you that's not been down there working this legislation and stuff, anybody wants to go with me when I go, you give me a holler ahead of time, we'll load up and we'll go. It's hard on your feet, it's good on your heart. Actually, it's kind of fun. And it's kind of fun, and you get to know these legislators like they're the real people that they are. And you'll get to know when their husbands are sick and their wives are sick. And you'll get to talking to them about it. And you also will be lighting them up when it ain't working right. And they'll learn, if you handle yourself professionally, they'll learn to respect what you have to say. And if you don't handle yourself like that, they'll kind of, you need to make them understand you know what's going on when you come through the door. First time I talked to Curry Todd, he said, you Tea Party people are going to have to understand, you don't understand how things work down here. I've been down here 15 years, and I said, Curry, that might be the problem. I go, I don't need your history. I need you to vote on this bill. He goes, well, tell me what you got. And I sat down and talked to him. Ron Lawler. Now, when I talk to Ron Lawler, we're talking about blowing up beaver dams in between the legislation. But you'll build those kind of relationships. Do I know Ron Lawler? Yes. Can he be a worm on the right day? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you got to know him before you can know him. And there's where we went with that. But I see some good things coming this year. And we can't do it without you guys. I'm just one guy. But when I come back here and want phone calls, you guys have been good about doing it. And it gets tiring, and you don't think it's worth it sometimes, but it is worth it. Because if 14 counties can put those kind of calls on them, they're going to listen to you. They know they're voters. And if the call comes from Humphrey County, that's one thing. But when the calls start coming from their districts, oh my, one of them's worth 10 of the others. So there's where the coalitions are very, very important. If I need to call Joey Hensley, he'll listen to me when I call. He's going to really listen to Trish when she calls. Because he knows that's the deal. So think about it, guys, and help us out with that. We need the input. Give us the input. Yada, yada, yada. All right, here's what we got. On the 7th Congressional, we got 14 from Marsha Blackburn, 32 for Mr. Arnold, 15 for Mr. Aiken. On the Bob Corker race, we got 1 for Bob Corker. Is Bob here tonight? Bob's not here tonight. All right. We got 60 for Mr. Crowell. We got 7 for Mr. Clayton. Mr. Romney got 56. Gary Johnson got 8. Our top 2 on the legislative issues were Islam and health care. And the Islam issue would be a strengthening of Bobby Petraeus' bill last year on the Islamic bill that caught so much heat, got watered down so bad. We'll talk to her and see if she's got anything coming to strengthen that bill up a little bit, because any bill, when you feel downhearted when you don't get the whole bill you wanted, but it's better than no bill because you got something to work off of when you come back. So that's the way it works. And I would assume at a 67%, Mr. Crowell got it, right? 60, he's up there. What's Mr. Arnold's? 50. So at this point, with the new rules, the way we run them, the way we talked about it, at this point we're actively supporting Mr. Sean Crowell. So we'll be talking to him. We're going to be we'll be like his new brother. I'd like to thank all these guys for coming, and I'll talk to some of you guys after this thing's over. And I'd like to thank all y'all for coming, because especially the ones that come a long ways. It's good to see those faces, and they're going to be seeing me whether they like it or not. That's the way it is. Thanks a lot, and be safe.